Today on Quest, survivor of 2 near-death experiences, Peter Panagore. Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hi everyone, I'm your host, Todd Fischer, and this is Season 2 of Quest. For those of you that might be new listeners, let me tell you a little about me. I'm the founder of Metacortex and the author of the best-selling book, Metacortex: The Grand Design. I'm a philosopher, a theorist, and a metaphysicist. I'm a perpetual pupil of theology and an expert in comparative religious study. I've also extensively researched the mind-body connection, anatomy, and physiology. I'm a researcher and a storyteller. And in order to tell this story, the research is necessary, and part of the research is the search. And that brings us to why I created the Quest podcast. A quest is a search for something, and this podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. To me, curiosity is part of what makes us human, and there's still so much we don't know. There's joy in discovery. It's what drives us. It's our quest. Hi everyone, welcome to the Quest podcast. Today my interview is with Peter Panagore. Peter was a college student ice climbing on his spring break when mistakes on the mountain caused him to die from hypothermia. He shares the aftermath of his near-death experience and much more right now. Enjoy the interview. Hi Peter, welcome to the Quest podcast.
Hey Todd, thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Great. I'm so excited to talk to you today. You have such an interesting story I want to get into, something I've wanted to bring to the Quest podcast for a long time. You have actually had 2 near-death experiences, which is, I can't even fathom that. Like most people don't get one of those, much less get 2, or if they've died and come back, ever had any recollection of what happened. And you have 2 incredible stories that you're going to share today. And I want to tell everyone a little about those and just kind of your experience with it. That's what we're going to talk about. Your first one, now correct me if I'm wrong on these details, but you've had 2 NDEs, and your first death occurred in 1980 from hypothermia while ice climbing in Canada. And your second was from a heart attack in 2015. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Wow. So I want to get into the 1980 incident, but before we talk about that, tell me a little bit about your life before that. What was early Peter like? What was your life like before that particular thing? Because I really want to use it in comparison to how your life might have changed afterwards. Tell me a little about your early life.
Grew up outside of Boston and was in a hockey town where I didn't play hockey. I skied, and so I was kind of on the outs with my little community, but I was a Boy Scout. I went to Catholic high school. I was raised in the Greek Orthodox and Roman Catholic Church, a person of belief, and that plays into my story here today. And I was a meditator. I went to St. John's High School, which is outside of Worcester, Massachusetts, where my senior year, they taught us meditation. I had a predisposition, you could say, toward mystical experience, but that's an entirely bigger story. My near-death experience, my first time I died, made all the rest of that stuff look like nothing.
Wow. How old were you in 1980 when the first occurrence happened?
Well, I had just had my birthday, and I was 21.
21. Wow.
Yep.
So you found yourself. So you grew up religious, and
Yeah, but I was I also grew up in a place you know, I was 1970s. I was smoking pot and hanging out with girls, and I was doing rock and roll. Sex, drug, and rock and roll was what we were all aspired to in our blazers and neckties.
Yeah. Right, right, right. Well, what got you into Canada for this, for this ice climbing expedition? So you were with someone who was skilled at ice climbing, but you were a novice at this. Is that right?
True, true, true. No, I was in Montana as an exchange student for a year at Montana State University, and I didn't want to go home to Boston for spring break. And I was looking for a high adventure. I was a high adventurer. I'd spent a lot of time in the high peaks. I was a backpacking climber, rock climber, National Ski Patrol. And so I found a guy at the outdoor club who was taking a trip to Alberta and Banff and to spend a week snow caving, backcountry skiing, and ice climbing. And I'd been winter camping since I was a kid because I was a Boy Scout, so
Yeah.
I was in. And so I was in, and so I went up to the week we spent at snow caving up there with Tim is the guy's name, and at the end of that week we went to this world famous climb called Weeping Wall, Lower Weeping Wall, on a mountain called Cirrus Mountain just north of Banff, and it wasn't very far off the ice fields parkway. It was walking distance, 15-minute stomp in the snow, and there were a whole bunch of teams there climbing that day. And I had convinced Tim, and Tim agreed that I could climb with a hammer and an axe because I didn't have all the gear. So I came up with the gear, rented, borrowed, found, whatever. And I could only come up with one axe and a hammer. And we decided to make the ascent with that setup. And you can climb with a hammer, and I did. I climbed all the way up, but the problem was is that I was exhausted by the time I got to the top because I could never rest. You can't
Mm,
rest with a hammer in your hand. So
right.
you have to always grip, and that burned out both my forearms, which meant I had to take a lot of breaks, which delayed our climb all the way up. And so by the time we reached the top, it was sunset, and all the other teams, a dozen teams, maybe half a dozen teams, it they were leaving, and we were just at the top of the climb, and we had prepared for a day like everybody else. No stove, no food, no sleeping bags, none of that kind of stuff, because we were supposed to be off the mountain.
Yeah.
Sunset, temperature dropped 30 degrees in minutes. It's the middle of March, and we're a day's drive from the Arctic Circle, and there's 10 feet of snow on the ground, and it's a sweaty sport. So I was wet from sweat, and we were out of water and out of food, and the temperature dropped, and we knew we were in trouble immediately. There was climbing is unlike backpacking in that if you're climbing a mountain and a backpack, you can turn around, but ice climbing, you can't turn around. There's no like halfway up and say, oh, let's bag it for the day. You can't do that. And
Right.
so we had to climb, and when we were sitting there side by side, Tim hauled up this long rope that then he laid in because of the stress of the situation into a big knot rather than a cleanly laid line in the dark. The moon was down and there was a million stars, so we could see somewhat in the available stellar light. And we immediately started having violent shivers because our temperatures dropped radically and we weren't dressed for cold night. And so we were shaking. When I say I was shaking, it was like my entire body was a vibrator. It's like, but it was vibrating inches, and I couldn't control anything. I mean, I moved my arms. I had large control, but I couldn't stop everything from shaking, including my jaw, and that's really what began to make us understand, because Tim was in the same position, how serious the situation was, because hypothermia can kill you. And I knew this because I was on the ski patrol, and I knew how it could kill you. And we decided that we were going to die there or die getting off the mountain. So I had to untie the knot, which meant I had to take my gloves off, which started frostbite in my hands. And so that took quite some time. How long, I don't know. Um, we tied off to each other because it's still pretty dark out. We tied off to each other and we traversed across the face of the cliff on a narrow trail and got to the first rappel. And because hypothermia interferes with thinking, we made our next major mistake. And that was not using a piece of webbing, which is a nylon tube that's flat, and you can tie it in a square knot and make a very strong loop. You can tow a car if you put it on your trailer and your pickup truck. You can tow your trailer with this in between. And so we take this webbing, and we're supposed to put it around the tree and then hang the rope through the webbing. And well, we didn't do that because we didn't want to waste the webbing because it was expensive. So we threw the rope around the tree and we rappelled down this what turned into like an underhang, where you had to rappel down through free space with no feet on the mountain. We got to this landing and the rope above got stuck frozen to the tree, which is why you're supposed to use the webbing so it doesn't freeze to the tree, but it froze to the tree, and we couldn't get it free for a long hours. We tried, and finally Tim um, tied these knots called Persic knots. They're ascending hitches. If you put tension on them, they lock onto the rope. It's some high percentage, like 90% friction. It's like whack, really tight. So Tim ties these two Persic hitches with loops to reascend up the rope, which is in this underhang, and I wrapped the rope around me, and it became this taunt-ish line. And Tim began to ascend, and he got maybe 20 feet up. My face was in the snow. I just know he was up some distance, and he called falling, and the rope came free, and I rolled out of the way, and he landed half on me and half in the deep snow. By this point, we were elated because the rope was free, and so we stood and I'm going to cut this story really short here.
No, this is a good story. You tell as much as you want.
Okay. All right. So the rope comes down. We pull the rope down and we stand, and now we're uncoordinated because the body stops to function well. Everything starts to freeze. The brain starts to freeze. The blood starts to slow. The brain is starved for oxygen. We're sort of beyond shivering, but we're still shivering. But we're like, that was the body trying to keep itself warm. Now's the body's doing other stuff, trying to like figure out what's wrong with it. And we can't talk because every time we talked, we minimalized our speaking, because as we spoke, we each felt the energy level in our body, if we had a meter, go down, 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 down with every single step and every single motion and every single word. And we decided that we would conserve our energy and speak little. And so we traversed over to the next rappel, and we descended down this dark crag. Round a corner, we stood on this ledge 150 feet up with two iron pins hammered into the granite mountain with iron rings and carabiners and harnesses, straps rather, nylon straps that clipped to our harnesses. And Tim was to my left on this ledge, and I was to his right, and the moon had come up, and we could see. And I tied one end of the rope to my harness, and I tossed off the other side to pull the rope through the ring, and the rope got stuck on the first pull. And now we're in a serious situation. This is many hours after the sun went down. I have no idea how many. I was too busy moving forward with this internal drive that I discovered that I had, this deep well of desire to live, this like drive to survive, very mammalian like animalistic drive to live. And now I can't get the rope free, and we're stuck for hours. I can't get this rope free, and we know the dire situation that we're in. It becomes quickly apparent as the hours go by that we are not getting out of this. And so my body turned hot, and I unzipped my coat, which is a common hypothermic thing. And though I knew better, and Tim told me, zip your coat, I didn't care. And I became peaceful, and I began to understand that really, truly, I was going to die here. And when that idea came into my head, I sort of relaxed. And I started thinking about my family and my spirituality and God, and I accepted the situation that I was in. And then I began to fall asleep. And I would fall asleep and I would collapse and I would smack and wake up and stand up and yank on the rope and repeat. And this one time I stood up again. As I stood up, I saw my peripheral vision become like a spotlight on a stage that fades to black very rapidly. It closed down on me. Oh, darkness, darkness, darkness. And I swung my head and could see it's like tunnel vision. But it was the darkness coming. And when the darkness closed and the light was gone, I didn't lose consciousness. And I thought to myself, why am I not asleep? I am not asleep and I can't see. And then the darkness itself became deeper and far, 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 infinitely far in the distance. A pinprick of light appeared, and came rushing toward me and became larger as it came at me and communicated directly to me. It covered this vast distance in an instant. And as it came to me, uh, it communicated, I'm taking you. And I resisted with all of my meager might. And it plucked me like a daisy. And I was carried off. And I realized all powerful, all intelligent, all comforting was this encasement of me, this containment of me, this vehicle of consciousness carrying me. And I was comforted. And I had no control. Even if I wanted to, I could not do anything but go with this power. And I was carried up this proverbial tunnel, but the tunnel was like wide and it was still infinite at the same time. And I suddenly appeared, or it expanded, or I popped through. It's very difficult to know exactly what happened in that moment into heaven, this infinite, eternal darkness that is paradoxically illuminated. I can't see infinity, but I can see that infinity is beyond my sight. And I can see in every direction at once, like I'm a single orb of an eyeball. Like my eyeball, my orbness, my soulness, my consciousness was a singular entity with which was my ears were my eyes, was my soul, was my mind, was my thinking. I was this one thing. I didn't have a body anymore. I had no, there was no, there were no quarks, no pheromones. There was, not pheromones, I'm going to skip that part. There were no quarks, there was no molecules, there was no selfness left of my body. There was no thingness left of me. I was a no thing in the middle of nothing. Okay.
Hmm.
Nothing. And the nothing was full of itself. And I was unafraid. And my first thought was, I am me. This is me. And I am bigger, like it can expanded 10,000 times bigger than I ever was as a human being. And I know this is me. And I had forgotten that this was me. And I tell all of this, Todd, in metaphor, but metaphor is the only tool that I have. And I'm in timelessness. I'm in a place of all time and no time, all time like linear time, but also reversed time and sideways time and all times that you can't even imagine exist. I couldn't understand, but they were all concentrated in an eternal now. And I use metaphor when I talk because I have no other tool. And I
Sure.
tell it in a sequence because I have no other way. So I knew that I was in this space, and there was a portal opened in front of me, like a doorway, a gateway. I and it was translucent, like I could see this substance to it. It was transparent. I could see through it. and it had some kind of solidity to it as well. All three, all at once, and I could see them all. And it was this flowing shimmer, this light, this like a waterfall of sparkle. And I touched it with my being, like my soul self. I moved toward it and touched it, and I was all these things happened at once. I was infilled with this all life, all living, all creator, the all in all, the omniscient, the all intellect, the all powerful flowed inside of me and filled me and showed me myself. It showed me that I was known. I'd always been known. There was no part of me that was unknown. It showed me my origin of my creative self, like a photon of one singular superpositioned photon that was both all of the light of all of the universe, all crushed into one star, but not a black hole. And I was one tiny bit of that, separate from it, but part of the same thing. And I was created. A creator was telling me, you are a creature. I made you, and didn't mean the Peterness of me, the body, physical, but that too. But it meant the soulness of me, the true origin of myself. And I could see this long, eternal, not quite eternal length of my soul, but I was always in the now, but I was also very old, beyond ages, and I was beloved. I was beloved, and I heard my name called of my soul, and it wasn't Peter. It was that sound which I can't tell you, that creates me as I am, where I am right now. And created me in the essence of my being, in the very start of myself. And I went also, because I was utterly known, I also went through a hell of my own making. I suffered all of the pain that I ever gave away in my life to everybody from their point of view. I had, when I had intentionally or unintentionally caused wounds to anybody else, it was my karma to receive those wounds inside of me, sort of like they bounced off of that person and stuck into me. Only I experienced their pain, and I experienced this magnification of their pain, which is what their soul felt, uh, not what I thought they felt. And that was juxtaposed to my own rationales for causing such pain to, or accidentally causing pain that I did not even know about. And I judged myself guilty. And in the judgment of myself as guilty, I could see that love was the treasure that was given to me, and that was being given to me, and that had always been given to me by the people who loved me. And all the love that I gave away, I got to keep, and all the love that was given to me, I got to keep. And the voice, I call it the voice, was speaking inside me. All of the things that I just said, showing and speaking, are the same thing. And it was showing and speaking inside me, love you, love you. I know you. I made you. I always known you. I love you. I forgive you. I forgive you. Come home. Come home to you are my beloved. And I was instantly, like, I turned myself away from my guilt, and I looked instead at the light and love, and was infilled instantaneously with bliss, healing, wholeness, love, adoration, awe, understanding, intellect. In an instant, I knew everything that I wanted to know, everything I wanted to know. I knew it all. And joy and beauty, just beauty. uh, and I saw all of humanity is the same as myself. And that that all the pain we cause each other and the suffering we endure in life ends. And we don't have to take it with us. And everyone was the same. Every person was the same as me. And it wasn't our fault that the universe was built this way.
Yeah. Wow, that's incredible.
I can
I don't
keep
even.
going. I haven't let you talk at all, Todd, and I feel weird about that.
No,
But
it's okay. I usually do most of the talking. I don't usually do most of the talking, but my dad always says, "I wish you wouldn't talk as much because I want to hear the other people talk." So this is great. The story is great, but I want to. So I have like a bajillion questions I want to ask, but to keep this going, I want to know, when did your place in the universe there end? And do you remember coming back to life? What was
Oh
that whole
yeah.
catalyst? How did all that happen?
Well, when I was filled with this, I was filled with this substance. Okay, I'm in the middle of this billion. What's the biggest number you can say? Zillion? You know, it's 100 bazillion bazillions, and
Yeah.
that's how big this was. And it was consciousness, but it was also right next to me. But I couldn't see it, but it was everything, and it was speaking inside me. And I said to it, "Am I dead?" And the voice said, "Yes, you're dead. And come home, come home." And I said, "But my parents, my sister had run away when I was a kid had broke my mom and hurt my dad and broke up the family in a way and caused a lot of suffering." And so I said, "I can't take another kid from my parents." And I was swept to the edge, like the edge of the heaven. Like I was instantly carried, again with no will of my own, just carried to the edge of heaven where I could see earth from this edge of heaven. And these things happened at the same time. I could see all of earth like a hologram and every single human being on it. And everybody's covered with a veil. And the veil prevents every single person from seeing what the divine is telling me and showing me. That the love is a, a gazillion times greater than I could possibly say, and that it was, always is, and always will be that amount of love available for me, whether I'm living or dead, whether those people are living or dead, whether they know it or not. This love that you now know, the voice says to me, "You now know this truth about me, and this is true for every single person you see, 7 billion people on earth." And I could see, and for your parents too, and that their life will end, and that the veil will raise, and that they will experience this divine love. And I could see my parents' faces and their anguish, like the depth of their anguish over all this decade of suffering. And I could see the trajectory of their life without me, and with me. And I said, "I haven't gone through the tunnel. I haven't gone on yet. I haven't made the full journey yet. I'm still in this space between, do I have to come home? Can't I go back and help my parents?" And the voice said to me, "I want you to come home. This is your time." I said, "But I haven't gone through. And do I have to go? Or can I, if I go back, can I come back here to this divine place? If I go back to help, can I come back to this bliss?" And the voice said, "Yes, you can do that." And I said, "Well, then I choose to live my life." And the voice said, "You won't live your life." And sent me back. And as I went back, I had to make it commanded me, choose. And in front of me, as I was flying across heaven back into the universe, I had all these entry portals. There was like, I've been describing it recently like the cut end of a huge cable on a suspension bridge. And it's all these wrapped wires, and they're all next to each other, and there's a million of them. Only for me, they're entry points back into my body. And they are circuit. It's like a big circle, and in the middle is this intense beam of the purity of the white light itself. And then it radiates out to the edges, and there's no part of this entrance panel that doesn't have the light, but the intensity is in the middle. And there were 10 million, a million entry points for me to choose from. And I remember thinking, I want to live a kind of a creative bohemian life. I want to have I want to be me somewhat. I don't want to go into the divine center where I was being sort of led to the center of the light itself. And I kind of leaned away from it. I didn't go right into the middle of it. I went off to the side of it, and I entered in. And as I've lived my life, I saw all of the probabilities of my life that I've lived in the moments that I've made the choices. I like live a moment before myself all the time. Like, people have deja vus. I- it's it, it but it's not a fate, okay? It's all the willful choices that I've made in my life every single step of the way that make the future that I'm in out of all of the probable futures that I could have had. And because I saw all of the probable futures every single time this thing happens to me, which is frequently, I I understand that it's a consequence of all the choices that I made. And
Right.
so over my lifetime, I've chosen to lean. I don't know that I always make the right choice. I can tell you that my family says I don't. You know, I've made bad choices in my life. But what I try to always do is every choice that I make, I lean into the light. So good point, good choice, or bad choice, I still try to lean into the light with every single choice. And so that was a major consequence of of my life coming back. I woke up on the mountain. uh, I was crushed down like in a compactor and stuffed, screwed, placed back in my body. And the first thing that I was in the place of the forgetfulness of suffering. And the first thing I learned about when I came back was suffering, because my body was, it was crude, it was painful, and I
Let's talk about that. So when you live back on the physical plane of Earth now, and you've come back to life, where were you? Were you on the mountain again? Were you in a hospital? What do you recall
still on
there?
the mountain, still dangling, still lying there, and still hanging on, just lying on the, kind of lying, half lying off this ledge,
Uh-huh.
because I'm on a strap, and so I sort of come into this painful thing that I didn't understand, and it sort of warms up and comes online. And the first thing that comes online for me is like pain out of my feet, because my feet are blocks of ice, my fingers are frozen, my face is frozen, I got frostbite, I'm frozen to the core, and all I feel is physical pain. And then my brain sorts of starts to warm up and starts to work, and I hear sound, and after a period of time I feel my body, this body jostling, and I hear this voice, and I don't know what it is. And eventually Tim's pulling me up and pulling me up and pulling me up, and my body starts to work, and I start to climb back up again. And I look at him, because I've got eyes open now, and I'm like, what is this? Where am I? What is this thing that I'm stuck inside of? And that noise. And he's screaming at me, you were dead, you were dead. If you died, I was gonna die. And and I was like, what happened to me? I
So Tim confirms that you died there.
Yeah,
Wow. Does he? How long do you think you were dead?
don't know.
Hmm.
Neither of us were head watches, and neither of us, were like paying attention at the time. We were just trying to
Wow.
live. So I don't really. It could have been a second.
And and
I don't
how
know.
and how did you eventually make it off the mountain?
Well, for hours I've been trying to yank on that cable, on that rope rather, and I couldn't get it free. And so Tim told me what to do, because I could understand English now, and I pulled on the rope, and it came free on the first pull. And
Hmm.
we descended, and we went to our tent, and we treated for hypothermia. And once we were warm enough, once I judged that we were warm enough, we got into the car and fired up the heater, and
Wow.
that's how we survived.
And did you have any lasting damage from that? Did you have severe frostbite?
I
Was there
didn't have
anything else
I,
that?
I didn't lose any digits. I've got damage. Everybody, let's put it this way. I've been wearing a mask. I'm way before it was vogue. Okay, I wore it. The temperature goes below 45 degrees, and I've got a scarf on my face because my face hurts, my nose hurts, my cheeks hurt, my chin hurts, my ears hurt, my fingers hurt. I can't feel the bottom of my big toe, but I have all my digits, and
Yeah.
it really wrecked my internal thermometer. My
Yeah.
internal thermometer has been like haywire ever since.
How did your life change after that incident? I imagine you must have thought about this event that happened to you over and over after that. What happened to you after that, kind of
Oh,
mentally and physically?
well, it wasn't like the event ended. It was like I came back, but I came back as a I came back as a stranger in a strange land. It was ongoing. That was the craziest thing about it, was that even though I wasn't where I was before, when I understood 100% and I could only understand 1% of what had happened to me, what I saw, but 100% of the world had shifted. I'm in my body. I look just like the same guy I was before, but I am not the same person. Everything. Let me put it this way: everything looked flat and ugly to me. Everything looked like I was in a black and white 1930s silent movie with grain. It's very grainy, and it's poorly designed and poorly put together. And as beautiful as Earth is, and as beautiful as people can be, it was all very flat to me, and I was lost. I was an alien, and I can't really tell you how radically different everything looked to me, including myself. I was as if I was sitting on a chair at the top of a set of stairs, looking down through a lens on the first floor. And everybody thought that I was the lens on the first floor, but I'm up on the stairs. I'm looking through myself out into the world, and I'm still connected to the divine, and I still know that I can hear inside me my name being called. That same voiceless expression of myself being made, it's like resounding inside me. And it's so this so it wasn't just the physical aspects of it. It was this entire perspective shift. It was like when, to go to the black and white again, it was like in the 1960s when suddenly Technicolor came online, and people switched from black and white to color TVs. It was much more radical than that, but I'm at a loss for a metaphor for it. So to express the immensity of it. So every eating was weird, walking was weird, having to have any sort of physical thing was weird, having to open a jar was weird, having to listen to music was weird. Everything around my whole world was completely upset, and I ended up having a hitchhike. Tim and I, long story short, some terrible things happened. Okay, as bad as that night was, other bad things happened, and as it was, we ended up with no car, and I had to hitchhike back to Bozeman, and Tim took the bus with a bunch of our gear, and I felt incredibly, utterly alone, and that feeling of aloneness lasted for most of my life. It
Hmm.
just, but aloneness in the world, and I eventually realized that the only way I was going to understand and overcome my non-attachment to the world was to aim my entire interior world at the divine itself, and try to cling to it for life and balance and stability. And because I couldn't talk about this thing. This is crazy. So I kept it a secret. um, I was an English major. I was going to be an architect in the family business. That was the expectation in my family for decades. I even was working in construction, working for contractors during the summer so that I could, deal with that end of understand those sorts of things and the people who work there, and be able to be that front guy. And my sister was already headed off to architecture school. And so I didn't do that. I came back a very different person, and went to I decided to become a Trappist monk because I had had some exposure to the Trappist monks, and the depth of their spirituality was very clear to me. I could see their radiance. I could see. Okay, I know how kooky this stuff sounds, which is why I kept my mouth shut for so many years. I see people's radiance all the time. It's like it's always there. And it's not just in human beings. It's in plants, and it's in dogs, and it's in birds, and it's like, how do you tell people that? And
You know, I
yeah, but
I
that's
I completely subscribe to everything that you're saying here. I want to pose a question to you though. A lot of psychologists would call maybe what you were going through PTSD. How would you address that?
I
Someone
would
saying
say,
that everything you're suffering from is just that.
oh well, I would divide that thing into two. I would divide that. I would say, I have said I do have PTSD. That night, I had really bad PTSD from that night, and the next night, it was terrible and terrifying, and the terrible things that happened to me in the consequences of my life just exacerbated that, and I've finally begun to deal with that, 4 or 5 years ago. So yes to the PTSD, no to the radical shift because so this is what I did. I didn't know. So now this is hindsight, Todd. So I'm telling you 40 years out. But at the time, I like thought I was gonna go crazy. I thought, what is this crazy? Am I insane? Who else is like this? Nobody, no books about this. So I was gonna go to where I thought I could learn something, which is from the Trappist monks. But I decided not to do that. I decided to go to graduate school, like was planned, but I went to go study mysticism. So I studied mysticism at Yale, and I did a 3-year master's degree under the tutelage because they didn't teach about mysticism, but they had a lot of courses and resources. So I created my own course of study under one of the deans, and I learned a language and explored the history of what classical Western mysticism, which expanded into Eastern mysticism as well. But that's a different part of the tale. And so I came to understand that these people, these mystical geniuses, I'm like them. And I know how weird that sounds, but the only people who were my peers who I understood were people like Meister Eckhart and the Cloud of Unknowing and Teresa of Avila and Julian of Norwich and Hildegard of Bingen. When I read these people, and the list goes on and on and on, and when I read these people, I saw in their descriptions, using metaphor, because that's the language of mystics, I saw in their descriptions my experience. I saw where they went, I went, and what they understood, I understood. And so I began to um, recognize that because inside I knew it was real, but I'm in the world. How can I can't prove this thing to anybody. I can't show this thing to anybody. It's all subjective. What do I do with it? I learned to dive inside myself. I learned that the only way, all the knowledge in the world that I could accrue for explanation and self discovery, self realization, some might say, is no good to me in terms of because it's all based in the physical world. It's all physical stuff. It's all matter and thingness. And what I crave is thinglessness. And so I used what I studied and learned about practices of prayer. And I spent the last 40 years of my life banking on it. Um, Practicing different forms of spirituality to carve a path inside myself back to my origin so that I could find stability in the world, which it has given me that, and also to by giving me a deeper soul connection to the oneness of being, which I want to make sure that people understand this about me, is that it's not ever about me. I know that even my ego, my body, my brain, it's all thingness. And the only thing that is not thingness, the only thing that is reality itself with a capital R, is the divine being. And that's the truth of myself. And so I always aim for that which is larger than me, from which I come and from which
Sure.
everybody comes. Everybody's like that. Everybody is beloved. Everybody.
What do you say to people that say that this was all maybe just happening in your brain, that maybe your brain was secreting a chemical that was putting you at ease as you were dying? How would you address that?
I sure hope science continues to look to find out the truth of that.
Yeah.
I'm a supporter of of the scientific studies, and a reader of Bruce Grayson and Sam Parnia. It's a couple of docs who study this kind of stuff, and I want science to dig deep, dig deep, dig deep. Um,
Yeah.
and maybe it'll turn out that they're right. Maybe it'll turn out that it was all serotonin, but I don't think so. I think that it's far too common an experience. Tens
I
and
agree
tens.
with that. I
Yeah.
agree with that. And these the similar narrative that are told by a lot of different people that have never met. Do you ever have a dream or a vision that triggers the moments around the NDE?
Uh, the weird thing for me is that I didn't have a brain when I was dead, and yet I remember so much of it. And I live with it, so it's this ongoing experience. It doesn't like I have to remember it. It's like it's always present with me. It's like my breath. It's always right here, right now. Even if I try, I can get rid of it for a while. I can distract myself, but it's always present. And so there's that part of it. But meditation, my life of meditation and Kriya yoga, so like a Kriya yoga or a Vipassana kind of yoga I use in my Hatha practice. Um, it thins the veil inside me and makes present the divine in a way over which I have no power sometimes.
Sure.
Um, and so I don't know if that answers your question or not, does it?
It does. It does. So let's talk about the heart attack in 2015. How was this experience the same or different?
It was different and similar. It was I have a congenital thing in my family and killed a bunch of people in my family. Let's just say that.
Mhm.
And so I had a heart attack and I got rushed, but it took hours because I live in a very rural place to get to the catheterization lab, which is an hour and a half from my house. And I was already an hour into the event by the time I left for the catheterization lab. So that was bad just to begin with. And on the way down in the ambulance on a Saturday in Maine summer traffic, I died. And I came out of my body. This is what happened. I heard the paramedic radio in and say we're losing him, and so I opened my own. And I'm not on morphine. I'm not on any drugs at all because I can't take opiates. I'm sensitive to opiates. They make me super sick. And so I'm meditating to control my pain. It's like an elephant standing on my heart on one foot. And I'm meditating because that's one of the great things about meditation. You can control your pain if you're staring at it in meditation. And I'm not the only one who says so. It's a long standing thing. And so I'm using meditation to control my pain. And I hear her say, we're losing him. And I open my eyes and I look at her and I close my eyes. And when I close my eyes, because my pain's back again, because I'm not meditating, I'm out of my body. And I'm now above my body in a darkness. I can still see my body, but I'm in this comfortable darkness. And behind me, I turn, and now I'm like a astral self, spirit self, not soul consciousness self. And I turn, and my angel is coming toward me. This angel of light, this all powerful, all intellect that had collected me before. And I recognize him like, hey, I finally get to go home. I've been wanting to go home for so many years, decades, and I start to go, and it's communicating to me, I love, come home, love, welcome. It's your time, come home. And so I start to go, and then I think to myself, well, wait a second, let me make sure everything's good. And so I turn around and I look inside myself again. And when I was in the urgent care center, my son, who was like 24, 26 at the time, um, was there, and he grabbed my hand and he leans in and he looks me in the eyes. He's really close to my face. I love you, Dad, he says. And my wife's there and she squeezes my hand, and the look on her face is not good. And I got loaded in the ambulance. And on the after, okay, when I was in ICU, after I was in ICU, my son told me that the doc had told him to say goodbye to me because I was going to die on the way. That was like too much time had passed, too long a drive. He's going to die. Say goodbye to your dad. And so I look inside myself and I see him saying that to me. And I think, oh my God, he's not really ready yet. I can see it in his eyes. He needs me here. And then I think about my daughter who's just left her high school sweetheart who she married while she was in college, and he went off to Afghanistan, and terrible, terrible things happened. And she'd had a baby and she had just left him. And who's going to protect them? And who's going to be the dad for this baby? And I thought, I have to do this. I have to be there for this kid. And so I turn around and I look back up at the angel, and I'm outside of my body again, and I'm kind of going back up the tunnel, and the angel comes rushing down toward me, this orb of light, and welcomes me and loves me, and I just turn away. And I think must have communicated I'm staying, and I turned away and I went back in my body. And now, okay, so now she's gonna have her sixth birthday in a couple of weeks, and she was just been born at this time.
Wow.
So I guess the thing, and I don't know why this is, because I got to choose twice to come back, and both times I chose to come back to help somebody, help my parents not suffer as much. And both my dad's, he's 90, my mom's 89, and he's had a real rough couple of years. And he's looking at the end now, and so I've spent my life with them. I live in Maine, they live on Cape Cod, but I've spent my life with them, um, so that they didn't suffer so much. And now I'm trying to protect my granddaughter. Wow, that's not the right word anymore. It's more like be the father for her. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. Let me ask you this. Should people fear death?
No, absolutely zero zippo not. So that is a huge thing that happened. Two really big things that happened when the first day that I woke up from my first death. A, um, I don't have any more beliefs. I don't believe in culture or politics. I participate in culture and politics and religion because that's kind of what we do here on Earth, especially for someone in my position. But I don't believe in any of them. None of them are real. I am not a believer in heaven. I am not a believer in God. I am not a believer in the Bible. I know that God is love. I know God is real. And people can believe me or not believe me. I don't really care because I know where I'm going. And from the day that I died the first time until the day I died the second time, I prayed for my death every single day. Take me home. I want to go home. Take me home. And so I, I I was utterly unafraid on the day I died of a heart attack. I was completely at ease. I was the most at ease person in the entire scenario. Of
Wow.
all the people involved, I was completely calm because I knew I was going home. I was going
Yeah.
home.
Now, you've written books about your experiences. Tell the listeners about the books you've written.
I had a TV show for 15 years here in Maine and on two NBC stations, and I wrote 1,500 devotional stories, ecumenical stories of love for inspiration and hope. And in that book, I toyed with the idea of coming out of the closet for near death experience. And so there's a few stories in the book about that, about me dying, but I didn't reveal that it was me. And that was an experiment, and that became a main bestseller. And so then I wrote another book called Heaven is Beautiful. That first book was 2 Minutes for God, and this one is Heaven is Beautiful: How Dying Taught Me That Death Is Just the Beginning. And I I came out of the closet in a big way with that, because in part because it was people were asking me to come out of it to tell the story, and so I did, and it's become an Audible international bestseller, and it's both books are sold all around the world all the time, and I'm working on new stuff now. I just sold in the past year my rights to that second book to a couple of big producers in Hollywood, and we're deep into development. We've already been working on it for 9 months together, and they're making a feature film. And
Wow.
we just reached a milestone last week, and we have another milestone coming up in the next couple of weeks, and then it's off to the races. And then working on another book too, I've actually already written for that too. So
Yeah.
I should have two more books coming out in the next couple of years.
Good. Good. And what's your work primarily focused on today? What message are you putting out there?
Love. God is love. Fear not. Next question.
That's
No, what am I
that's
doing? What I'm
enough
doing?
said. That's really
That's it. So I'm doing a couple things. I'm doing I counsel spiritual problems, mystics, near death experiencers, people who've had experiences that they need to bounce off of somebody, or people who are seekers who want some either direction or mentorship or those sorts of things. And then I'm running this thing. I have a YouTube channel. It's called Not Church, because I was ordained in the United Church of Christ minister. I was always, I was all I was this a star in Maine and a bad boy in the United Church of Christ. I was equally as much trouble as I was helpful. I think in the denomination, I didn't do very well with the rule sets, so I started Not Church. Not Church is no dogma, no doctrine, no BS, mysticism primarily in the scriptures, but also the non-canonical, like the Gospel of Thomas. And I bring in Eastern religion as well as and Sufism and a bunch of other stuff. It's an exploration because all mystics speak the same language. It doesn't matter where they're from. Every one of us speaks in metaphor, and I'm a literary metaphorist, I guess you could say. And so I look at the scriptures mostly from the Bible, the sayings of Jesus, and deconstruct them and reconstruct them as I think that he meant to speak them, because he was talking, he's a code switcher. So code switching is speaking two languages at once, you Franglish or Spanglish or Greeklish. Jesus was talking Aramaic and metaphor, just like Lao Tzu was talking some Mandarin and whatever he spoke. I'm not sure which form of Chinese, and metaphor. So Not Church on Sunday mornings is a live hour broadcast. I talk for maybe 20 minutes. And we've got people from all over the world who come and listen and participate in the chat, the live chat afterwards. I'm trying to. This is what I think happened. I think that in the Council of Nicaea, I think that the church fathers got it wrong, and I'm not the only one who thinks this, when they made Jesus the only begotten Son, because I don't think that's what Jesus was saying. I think he was revealing the light inside himself most powerfully and saying that everybody has that light too. And it's available to you right now inside you. All you have to do is look for it and keep looking at it, and you'll be like me, is what he was saying. And
Yeah.
so I'm doing that, which makes me a heretic, which I hope increases my audience, because I think there's a lot of people who think what I'm saying is right.
Well, that's a great way to wrap the podcast up. And I think those are beautiful words. Really, what you're saying is really amazing. You mentioned a YouTube page. Where else can people find you out there on the interwebs? Are you on social media?
I'm on
other
social
places?
media. Hmm.
And you have a .com as well.
I do. It's peterpanagore.love. That's my main contact. But I'm on Twitter, and I'm on Instagram, and Facebook, and LinkedIn, and I'm not on Reddit much, but I'm a reader every so often.
Yeah.
So I'm out there. All those links are at my website, peterpanagore.love.
Perfect. Peter, I really appreciate you telling your story today. It was just really, really incredible. I just enjoyed sitting and listening during this one. It was such a compelling story. And I hope you come back again and do a future episode with me.
I will definitely do that. Thank you very much, Todd. It was great. And I feel like I monopolized the situation. I'd rather have a conversation, but I would love to come back and have a conversation with you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there wasn't much to really have a conversation about. It was all your journey. So it was like, I just wanted to hear it. Like, that was just so amazing. So, but I really appreciate you telling everyone this, and we'll do this again for sure. Thanks for coming out today.
I appreciate you having me. It's been a pleasure.
Take care. Have a good day.
There you have it, my interview with Peter Panagore. I hope you enjoyed it. Have you had a near-death experience? If you have, email me. I'd like to hear about it. You can email me at questwithtodd@gmail.com. You can also leave a voice message at anchor.fm/Metatomics. And I'll see you next week on Quest. Thank you for listening to Quest. Please be sure to rate and review this podcast. This podcast is produced by Todd Fischer and distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Be sure to visit the official website for the International Association of Metatomics at metatomics.org, or find us on social media for other unique content. And make sure to pick up a copy of the book that started the spiritual revolution, Metatomics: The Grand Design, available for sale online and at most major bookstores.